Hello, welcome back to WLOI, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOI.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle with Jeffrey Bazzi and Jimmy Cody. And now we're going to welcome on a guest. Eddie Stankowick is joining the show. Eddie, thank you for joining the show today. How is it going?
Pretty good, guys. Thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it is always a pleasure. And let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the baseball preview talk. Obviously the Yankees had some good game yesterday, to say the least. Aaron Judge started the season off exactly how he could wanted. Same thing can be said for Garrett Cole. He had 11 strikeouts. So on the Yankees front, I thought it was very good. But obviously, let's start with the AL East. Like, it's going to be a challenging division this year, to say like the least, because we got the Blue Jays, we got the Orioles, we got the Rays, and then we have the Yankees. And then ultimately, too, there's the Red Sox. But I think most people are expecting them to kind of be near the bottom. I could be wrong, but your thoughts are about the AL East. Let's go. Let's hear them.
Yeah, the AL East should be pretty fun this year. I think it's a pretty wide open division. Yankees looked real much better than I thought they would yesterday. Honestly, that was one of Cole's best games as a Yankee. Honestly, definitely up there, definitely in the top 10, I'd say. Yeah, Judge played really well yesterday. Yankees look pretty good. I'd be surprised if they didn't come in first or second for the most part. We still have players needing to come back. Pitching's going to be big. Like you said, the Orioles. I liked what I saw yesterday, I guess, from their bats. Adley Rutschman looks like he's going to be a star. But their pitching is just not going to be able to get it done. I don't think, especially with the shift changes and everything. I think pitching's going to get exposed a lot more. And yeah, it's gonna be tough for the Orioles to compete with the other teams. I think just because honestly their pitching isn't gonna be able to keep up. Red Sox too. I don't think they'll be anything great this year. Their lineup is probably one of the worst Red Sox lineups you've ever seen. Honestly, they got Justin Turner hitting third, fifth. Right now, it's not looking too great. What are your thoughts? You guys have anything you want to add in? I'm monologuing right now.
I mean, the team that I'm kind of most scared of, I'd say, as a Yankees fan in the AL East is the Blue Jays, because how loaded their lineup is. And obviously, you mentioned that pitching is important. And I don't think that the Blue Jays have the best pitching staff. But at the end of the day, there's still a lineup that I think from top to bottom can absolutely destroy anybody. Would you disagree with that?
No, their lineup's really good. And they added Dalton Varsho too. He plays outfield. He played right in the middle of their lineup. I think he's going to be a big addition this year too.
Yeah, so they're an absolutely loaded team. And then the Rays, right? They have very strong pitching. I mean, that's kind of the focus of their team. They have some really nice young players like Wander Franco too. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't rule them out at all.
No, Tampa you can never rule out no matter who's on their team because they're always just ever since they've had Cash at least, and under Madden too, obviously. They're just well managed and they're always going to compete. They're a gritty team. Rosarena is a star. Franco's a really good player. I know Isaac Paredes kind of had a breakout year last year. He was pretty good. I'm pretty worried about him and Yandy Diaz as well. They're both pretty good players. And they always have those random guys that are just annoying, like Manuel Margot, that are just Jose Siri.
Yes, they do. They have a lot of those annoying guys that just come out of nowhere, and they're all Yankee killers.
Yeah, all Yankee killers. And Shane McClanahan's one of the most underrated players in the league. He's a star, Shane McClanahan.
Yeah, I mean, I know him well from the AL East. Obviously, Jeffrey, you may not, because he is, not so close into your range and NL AL difference. But this is somebody who, whenever he pitches against the Yankees, I kind of fear Shane McClanahan, to say the least.
Yeah, he came on really strong last year.
Yeah.
As far as the AL East goes, I would be surprised that if the Yankees were not in the top two. I definitely think they're either going to win a division or be runner-ups. And I agree with you, Jimmy. I think the Blue Jays are definitely the biggest threat to the Yankees in that division. I feel like they're due in the sense that they've had this young core for a while, and I feel like now they're, I don't know, ready to kind of break out. I just feel like they have a really good group of guys in that lineup, and they could do a lot of damage. So I feel like they're definitely going to give the Yankees a run for the money. I think the two wild card mystery teams here are the Rays and the Orioles. With the Rays, they've been perennially good every year. They find a way to get in the playoffs. And like Eddie said, they have these guys who are just so annoying and you've never even heard of them, but they find a way to hit 280 and they're just constant rocks in the lineup and they find a way to just win games. And then with the Orioles, they kind of came out of nowhere last year and this rebuild's kind of accelerated right now just because of the success they had last year. And now I think the question is, are they going to be for real again this year? I think they're trying to kind of break into that upper tier of the AL East. I'm not sure if they're ready to do that yet, but I do think they can make a little bit of noise. But I do agree. I think the Red Sox are probably the worst team in this division. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, I think when we get to September, I think we're going to be talking about the Yankees and the Blue Jays at the top.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. All right, let's move over to the AL Central now. I think the Guardians are by far the most interesting team, especially because I don't know what you think, Ed, but I think the rule changes kind of benefit them. Jeff, I don't know what you think too. I mean, this is a team that already stole a lot of bases. They're kind of young. They focus on their defensive kind of
It's fun
ways.
to watch too.
Yeah, like I feel like these rule changes kind of play into their hands, and I wouldn't be surprised if they like kind of are much better than all these other AL Central teams. Although I will say I was surprised with how well the White Sox played yesterday against the Astros.
He pitched amazing.
Yeah, Dylan Cease is a very talented pitcher. He's probably honestly one of the more underrated
Great
pitchers.
strikeout pitcher. He's
He is,
really
but
fun to watch.
see him last year.
Yeah, and he really kind of doesn't get the credit that he deserves. That's
No.
definitely true.
It
But
was the only thing associated with the White Sox last year that like wasn't an absolute nightmare.
yeah, I mean, especially with the season
Yeah.
that Tony La Russa had, obviously he's no
Yeah.
longer the manager.
Yeah.
But I think that was kind of like a good first step. But the White Sox are a team that does have talent. But would you agree that it's between the White Sox and the Guardians for the division, or is there somebody else between the other three teams you see kind of stepping in?
I guess you have to give the Twins a chance, but definitely not the Royals or the Tigers. They're both in complete rebuilding modes right now. I would say you have to give the Twins a chance because they do have some bats. They have Carlos Correa, obviously one of the best players in the game. If Buxton stays healthy, they do have Buxton right in the middle of the order. Kepler can provide a few homers here and there. But yeah, now that I'm more thinking about it, I have to agree. Yeah, it's either the Guardians or the White Sox. And this is surprising I'm saying this, but I honestly maybe would lean White Sox at this point because losing McKenzie was huge for the Guardians. Their pitching staff without McKenzie does not look too good, but I know in the past they've been able to turn pretty average or below average pitchers and make them look pretty decent. So we'll have to get that goes. Like this guy named Hunter Gaddis, you guys have probably never. He's going to be replacing McKenzie in the rotation. I don't know how that's going to go. But yeah, I might honestly would even lean the White Sox at this point, which is pretty crazy to say after how big of a disaster they were last year. Benintendi was a big pickup for them too. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of forgot about the Benintendi pickup because he kind of quieted down the second half of this year, especially after the first half, in which he was an all-star, but he was an all-star for the Royals. Once he came to the Yankees, he ended up getting injured. He kind of had a slow start, so really did not play super great in the second half. Although still highly respected player and a good player to add at the end of the day, especially because they got him on a pretty team-friendly deal. It was not that bad at all. But Jeff, anything that you would like to say about the AL Central?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it is going to be a 3-team race between Twins, White Sox, and the Guardians. Obviously, the Guardians coming in off of last year, they came out of nowhere and won 92 games. And I love their lineup. They have a young core. They can steal out of bases, and they can definitely hit for contact. And I do agree with Eddie's point that losing Tristan McKenzie early on will definitely hurt them in the short term, but I think long term they might be okay. But I think the White Sox are very interesting because they have a lot of guys in that lineup who can just, I don't know, put the ball in play. Tim Anderson, Luis Robert, he can provide a lot of power too. And I do like the pickup of Benintendi. I think that's going to be a very underrated pickup. And another underrated thing I think too with the White Sox is they have a new manager, Pedro Grifol, and I think he's going to provide a lot of stability because the Tony La Russa era just didn't really work out. And
To say the least.
I know that he didn't really have a lot of good relationships with some of the players there. And he obviously was dealing with health concerns as well. So it's not like he was there all the time. So it was a little bit of instability there. But I think bringing in Grifol kind of brings in a fresh face and kind of injects some new life into the clubhouse. But I wouldn't ignore the Twins. I think the Twins are kind of an interesting team. I think they have a lot of potential, but I think a lot of things will have to go right, specifically with Buxton's health. I think if Buxton's out there, he can be one of the best players in the game. And then with Kepler, I don't know, he's very streaky because he can strike out a lot, but he can also hit a lot of home runs. So if you get more of the home runs, I think that's going to do good things for them. And then their rotation's interesting because
Pablo.
they added Pablo Lopez, and that's a pretty big pickup because he's a pretty good pitcher. While they did lose Luis Arias, I think that's how you pronounce his name, by trading him for Pablo Lopez. I still think
Yeah,
adding Lopez is a
great.
big pickup, and they still have Sonny Gray, who's still like pretty like decent pitcher. I would say, right?
Sonny
I know you're
Gray.
laughing.
I'm sorry, the Twins just kind of I'm just laughing at the Twins in general because obviously the Yankees have owned the Twins most of my life, and
Yeah.
now they're picking up Sonny
Hey,
Gray
Gary.
and they have Gary Sanchez. Or no, Gary Sanchez is gone.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. They did have Gary
Yeah,
Sanchez.
I don't know. It's just the Twins just crack me up. When I heard Sonny Gray, I had no choice but to
But
laugh.
I do
But
think
Really not appealing to me this year. On like I'm looking at it right now with Joey
Yeah.
Gallo with
they do have Joey Gallo.
Gallo too.
Yeah.
Oh my
A
gosh!
lot of like hit or
Jose
miss.
Miranda,
Yeah.
Christian Vasquez.
Wow.
Christian
So
Vasquez, good catcher.
I will say though, if they get a lot of power, I do think they can be dangerous because they have actually pretty good pitching staff. Like Tyler Mahle is like not a bad pitcher. Kenta Maeda is kind of a wild
he
card.
sounds like the most mid pitching like literally
like the
just
most
middle.
mid-team ever.
Yeah, the most mid team ever. That's how I would
They
describe
usually
the
are-
Twins.
they usually are mid.
I think it's like so bad actually, other than Pablo Lopez.
Yeah, I mean Sonny Gray certainly doesn't jump
Joe Ryan's not bad either.
out to me to say the least. But really quickly too, I don't know why I just thought of this. Like we didn't really ever talk about this much, and I think while we have you, Ed, we have to bring it up. Like, how embarrassing was this second act for Tony La Russa? Like, he actually was a joke from the minute that he walked in the door as the White Sox. Like he was I would say the joke of the MLB as a manager the last couple of years.
It was horrible, honestly, to see, and it was sad because he's a Hall of Fame manager. He was a great manager with the Cardinals. He was a great manager with the Athletics, and he came back and completely embarrassed himself. That was the White Sox scenario last year. Was one of like the biggest, just like headaches, like locker room scenarios. It seemed like he just did not want to be a part of. Like it seems like they're getting a fresh start this year without him. I know they got Pedro Grifol, that Jeff just mentioned. I know he came from the Royals. He was there for like 10 years. So he's got a lot of experience. He's probably pretty respected. And yeah, they have to turn over a new leaf. That was just absolutely just terrible. Do you remember when the fan told him to pinch run?
Yeah,
and he did it.
And he did it.
That was crazy.
Yeah, he was taking requests from the stands. I mean, the White Sox in general have had some moments just make you shake your head. I would say
Yeah,
for
they're
me,
out horrible. Jerry Reinsdorf is a terrible owner. So.
Yeah, they've certainly had their moments. I would say the most notable thing that they've done, maybe besides sign Michael Jordan, was win that one World Series when we were younger. But besides that, I literally can't recall anything that they've done that really wasn't a joke.
No, they were other than the World Series when like we were younger. I don't remember that World Series. The first World Series I remember is 2007 Red Sox and Rockies. But yeah, they're one of the worst teams for our lifetime. For what do you remember?
Yeah. So, all right. So that's the AL Central. Let's now talk about the AL West. I mean, I think it's a pretty fun division because you got the Mariners, who are the young up and coming team, and then we have the Houston Astros, who are the defending champs. And then we have the Rangers, who have spent a lot of money. They're trying to improve their team. They obviously signed Jacob deGrom this offseason, but they also have Marcus Semien and among others. We also have the Angels, who, although they never seem to win anything, do have two of the biggest stars in baseball. I'm sure the Angels will be providing us some good laughs, though, because they probably will have like 70 wins, and both of them will be in top 5 in MVP voting, despite the fact that the rest of the team is a joke. And then we have the A's, who I'm surprised were able to get 100 people in the stands yesterday for their
last night.
Yeah, they beat the Angels, actually. So those two jokes just going up against each other. I was surprised with how full the stadium was. Like, it looked like there was actually more than 10 people there.
I didn't get to see that game at all. It looked like there were a decent amount of people there.
No, like they actually was like more people in the seats than empty seats.
Also, to bring up that Angels A's game, did you guys see the Hunter Renfroe catch?
Yeah. All he did was turn the wrong way.
I know, it just looked like a cool catch.
Yeah,
he just kind of stuck his arm out and he's like, "Oh, I have the ball."
It kind of like the way I looked at it is like he just kind of misjudged it, and then he had to it
just happened to be the right place.
Yeah, but I don't know if you saw, there was literally a guy on the Orioles I'm pretty sure it was Santander, who did the same exact thing and ended up botching the fly ball.
I did not see that.
But literally he tried to do the same thing earlier. So when I saw that highlight, I was just like, oh no, that's just a guy misjudging the ball. But it was cool because he actually caught it, where in the case of Santander, he embarrassed himself in left field. But it was still a cool catch to say the least. But Ed, what are your thoughts on this division? I think the team that's most interesting is the Mariners because of their youngness. And also, how are the Astros gonna be with the loss of Altuve at the beginning of the season? And also they got to replace Justin Verlander.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine. Honestly, I wouldn't sweat that too much. Their pitching staff is still absolutely top notch. I don't know if you remember from the playoffs last year, Jimmy, but
No, I remember. Yeah, trust me. I haven't stopped thinking
yeah,
about it.
I was talking about a player, Hunter Brown. This guy, they would compare him to Verlander. He's a really young kid. He's gonna be their number 5 starter, and I think he's gonna be a really good player. He's just gonna be another Yankee killer probably. They have a great rotation with Framber Valdez and Christian Javier. Luis Garcia should probably need to take a step forward this year, I'd say too. Yeah, their lineup's pretty solid, hands down though. Once they get Altuve back, they'll be cruising.
Yeah.
Mariners are a tricky team. I think the Mariners might regress this year. I think they might have played a little bit better than what they were last year.
That's interesting. Why do you think that?
I don't know. I just don't. I look at their lineup and it's nothing that's just like sticking out to me too much. Julio's obviously like a superstar. He's one of the best players in the game. Outside of that, Teoscar Hernandez, he did not have a great year last year. He's got to play well. Eugenio Suarez had a real like big bounce back year. Like I do not expect him to repeat what he did again. Cal Raleigh, their catcher, I don't really know what to expect much from him.
Probably get power from there.
And then like AJ Pollock. Then you have like the makeup of like AJ Pollock, Jared Kalenic, and who else?
Ty France isn't that bad. He's a decent player.
Yeah, Ty France is a good player. Yeah, I didn't mention him yet. Oh, JT Crawford. Yeah, like it's just
Billy
they're not.
Legend.
There's not.
Yeah, and also their pitching is like obviously they added Castillo last year at the deadline, and that was kind of like their big move. They gave him a big contract and whatnot. And I know he was the hot name last year, but he did well. But like, can he do it over a whole season? Obviously, like he was kind of in Cincinnati. It's no offense, it's a little bit easier to play when you know that you're just most of the time going to go out there and kind of like lose, or the team's kind of a joke. Whereas now it's like pressure from day one, so that'll be interesting too. And also, I mean, this was a team that they didn't win in the playoffs, right? Like they ran into the Astros, right? And that's also the same team they're going to play in division. So that's kind of the hill that they need to overcome. And I don't really think they're going to be able to do it. Just my opinion, but I would definitely agree with you. You're saying, Ed, that the Astros are probably better than the Mariners at this point.
Yeah, like do you remember last year when the Astros played the Mariners in Game 1 of the division series, and the Mariners were up 6-0 and lost? Like,
yeah,
they played like the best they possibly could, and like they were just not as good as the Astros. I mean, they weren't even close to them.
And in Game 3, they were right there, 0-0, and then 1-0, I think.
Yeah,
that was in that 18-inning marathon.
Oh yeah,
Jordan Alvarez is a killer.
Yeah. All right. So what about the rest of the division? You expect anything out of the Rangers, maybe the Angels, and probably not the A's, but we'll mention them, I guess, for the sake of the
Sure, I think they're going to compete for a playoff spot. Surprisingly, that might be a hot take.
The Rangers.
Yeah, I think if they're like role player, I guess that's not a word used for baseball, role players, but like not their stars. Like Josh Jung is a prospect, or basically his top prospect. If he plays well, along with like guys like Jonah Heim and maybe Robbie Grossman, they could have a nice team. I like the top of their lineup. Their top of the lineup right now is like Seager, Simeon, Nate Lowe, Adolis Garcia. That's a solid 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, so I mean they've made a lot of moves. They're trying to
obviously too. They have a decent pitching staff now.
Yeah, well, they have they have the great Andrew Heaney as well.
Oh, they're 5 though.
Yeah,
they also picked up Nathan Eovaldi too.
Yeah, he's there too.
Did they actually pick him up? Where is he in their is like starting rotation? Yeah. Is he like the 3 or 4?
Might be the 2.
He's there too.
Wow, okay.
He's pitching tomorrow.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I only know that because the Phillies are playing the Rangers.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's move over to the NL then. We'll start with the NL East. Jeffrey, let's start with you here since you kind of have that Phillies viewpoint. Where do you guys see yourself fitting in, and what's your expectations for the division?
Yeah, I think it's going to be another fun year in the NL East. It usually is, but I think it's going to be another fun year because I think it's clear that there's 2 tiers. It's the Mets, Braves, and Phillies in one tier, and then the Marlins and the Nats in one tier. I do think the Marlins are significantly better than the Nats, but besides the point, I think it comes down to the Mets, Braves, and the Phillies. And you look at the Braves, I mean, they just find a way to be good every year, and they've locked up a lot of these young players long-term. And It's funny because they've lost Freddie Freeman over the last year or two, and now they've lost Dansby Swanson. So you're kind of wondering how are they going to replace his production? I think they're going to be just fine because they still have Ronald Acuna Jr. and not to mention Austin Riley, who is kind of asserted himself as the second best player on the team, I guess you could say. I mean, Acuna has been hurt, and I know that Austin Riley's been there, but I still think Acuna is a little bit better. And then there's still some other guys like Matt Olson and Ozzy Albies and others who can chip in. And they have a pretty decent pitching staff with Max Fried and Spencer Strider and Michael Soroka. So they have a loaded team, just top to bottom. And the same can be said for the Mets. And I know that the Mets missed out on Carlos Correa with that whole debacle of a situation. And Edwin Diaz went down with an injury, which I think is going to be a huge loss. I think losing Diaz out of the bullpen is going to be a major loss. But I think Scherzer and Verlander are really going to carry that rotation. I think they do need some help behind them, but I do think they're going to get it. And then the lineup with Alonso, Lindor, McNeil, Nimmo, I think, and others, I think they're very well rounded. If I'm picking a team to win a division, I think I'd probably go with the Braves, just because I feel like I trust them more throughout the season. Because the Mets, they can be really, really good for 2 months, but then they can have an awful month and kind of collapse.
So the Mets are a joke, is what you're saying. You still don't.
No.
You still don't know that the Mets are going to Mets, basically.
You have respect for the Mets, Buzz.
No, I do have respect for the Mets. I just trust the Braves more over the course of 160.
I 100%.
You can just say it. The Mets are a joke. That's you can.
I don't
can
think
just
they're a
say
joke
that.
at all. I picked them to win the division last year.
Yeah, and then what happened? They led for how long in the season? And they said it was wrapped up, and then the Braves are watching Frank the Tank videos at the end of the season, getting a good laugh in, and literally, it's what's ultimately pummeled them to getting the division is because the Mets were just such a joke. Like that was such a downfall of a season. Like it's really a shame for a Mets like fans' point of view because they had a really good season. They had a lot of really talented players. Probably was the best regular season they've had in I don't know how long, but it's definitely been a while, right? We would all agree with that. And to have it burned down like that, I mean, especially after the moves you made, you got a Scherzer and you can't even win the wild card against the Padres, and then you see your own division rival, the Phillies, go to the World Series, who was definitely, no offense, that was kind of a surprise.
No, that was
Yeah, it was a
absolute
complete
nightmare.
shock. I'll admit it for myself as a Phillies fan.
Yeah, that was a very
I know,
shocking run. And to have that kind of go down the way it did for the Mets, poof, that is rough. Like they just have some really bad luck. And now to start the season with Diaz gone.
And Verlander, not to mention, he's on the IL.
And Nimmo.
And Nimmo. Actually, I think Nimmo did play.
Did you play? Oh.
No, yeah, Nemo's there.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was a complete joke or not.
Yeah.
But he did get hurt in spring training, so there was some worry there.
Yeah, I got to talk about the Mets too. Honestly, I think this lineup overperformed as well last year. I don't think it's going to be the same. I don't think it's going to be the same. Are you expecting Mark Canha and Vogelback to play like they did last year, and Escobar is still in the lineup? He was tired. He was a joke. They have Navarez, who's better than McCann. Yeah, I don't love McNeil's not going to win the batting title again. I wouldn't think.
He might be up there though. He's a really good hitter.
He's a good leadoff hitter, but yeah, I don't think their lineup's anything too special.
I thought Starling Marte really overperformed last year too. If you want me to be honest with you, like they made it seem like it's such great signing.
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, but can he do it again? Maybe. And then I don't know. But also, here's another factor: Buck Showalter has never actually won anything.
Yeah, no one likes to talk about that. Yeah, they're still talking about how great Buck is. They don't mention that he's never won a World Series.
Yeah, and it sucks for his sake because I don't think that he's a bad manager by any means. But if you look at it, really, with the exception of when you think about the Yankees, like they were better when he left.
Yeah, they were. Every team is always better when he leaves. That's the thing.
Well, except for the Orioles, obviously, but that was a full-on rebuild, so it's not really his fault.
No, and then the other thing is, I didn't even bring up the Phillies in this conversation, but I'll do it now.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how they start the year because last year's start in the first 2 months was absolutely awful. I mean, you saw the team go 7 or 8 games below 500, and then they sacked Girardi around Memorial Day, and then Rob Thompson comes in, and things slowly turn around, and they go on that magical playoff run that you mentioned earlier. I think if they can stay around 500 or be a little over 500, I think that's obviously the goal until Bryce Harper comes back, whenever that is. And I think early on, adversity is definitely going to hit the Phillies because they're down Ranger Suarez and Andrew Painter, who are going to be probably back end of the rotation guys. So I think some nights there's going to be so much pressure on Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler to kind of be on their A game. And you saw yesterday, Nola starts opening day, they have a 5-0 lead, and then he has one awful inning, and then the whole thing implodes from there. So I think kind of limiting those big innings for Nola is going to be huge. I think Wheeler's going to do his thing. He's been really good for us in the 2 years that we've had him. And then as the lineup goes, I think it's kind of contingent on a lot of guys bouncing back, specifically Nick Castellanos. I think you kind of look for him to bounce back. He kind of had a subpar year last year. And then there's other guys like Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh and then Mundo Sosa who are going to have to kind of chip in as well. And you would hope that Alec Boehm would continue to progress. I mean, he had a great spring, so you would think that he's going to kind of emerge. But I do think the Phillies are clearly the third best team.
And Schwarber and Real Muto have to play really good to start the season because they're essentially the stars of this team, as well as Trey Turner.
And Trey, I didn't even mention Trey Turner. He was the big offseason pickup. He's going to kind of have to set the tone at the top of the order. And once he gets on base, he's a threat to steal bases. So,
to say the least, he was already a guy who stole a lot of bases. I would not be surprised if he, really gets even more than he already had. Ed, how do you see the NL East finishing up? Oh, maybe he's gone. He must have got disconnected. Oh, okay. The NL East, how do you see it finishing up here?
At least I think Braves are going to take it this year, and Phillies and Mets be fighting for second and third. I think all three teams should probably make the playoffs, though.
Yeah. So let's move on quickly here to the NL Central. Maybe I would say the most boring division in baseball.
Yeah, we didn't talk much about the NL.
Yeah, there's not really much to talk about here, but I'll open the floor up to you, Ed.
Yeah, so obviously the team we're going to talk about first, I guess, is the Cardinals. They're the clear favorite. They didn't really do much the all season other than add Wilson Contreras, which is a huge addition in my opinion. He's a player that gets overlooked a little bit. Apparently, a lot of MLB teams would look at him as a guy that has a bad attitude and doesn't really call a good game behind the plate, which the Cardinals came out and said that they don't believe in it at all or anything. But yeah, I think he's a great player. I think he's a guy you want on your team. He's a fiery competitor. The Cardinals lineup's looking good. I don't know if you guys know Jordan Walker. He's a top prospect. He made the team with them. He's that the big part of their season probably going to rely on how good he is. If Tommy Edman can have another productive season, Goldschmidt and Arenado, that's another two. They have to play great again. Both of them they have to carry, and maybe Tyler O'Neill can have a bounce back year. Maybe see a little bit from Nolan Gorman or Brendan Donovan. Lars Nootbaar too. They got a pretty solid lineup. Pitching with them is a concern though. Right now they got Miles Michaelis, they got Jack Flaherty, they got Joe Montgomery. I can't even think of who.
Wainwright.
What's that?
Wainwright.
Oh, Wainwright, yeah.
Yeah.
And Steven Matz, I think too.
That's
very interesting pitching staff.
They're not going to. I don't consider the Cardinals a real contender to win anything, but I do think they're the best team in the NL Central. Brewers, they're just so boring. The Brewers, I don't.
They didn't do anything. I felt like.
Well, they did. They traded away Josh Hader last year, which I didn't understand because they had.
Yeah, and they got Taylor Rogers back.
I think they need to blow everything up over there.
Probably.
I'll tell you one team I'm very interested in this year.
William Contreras.
And that, yeah, I agree with that too. I think this team's very interesting, the division, the NL Central. And I'm not saying they're gonna be over 500 or be a playoff team, but I think the Cubs are kind of interesting this year. You look at them, they did not start very well last year. They kind of did better as the season went along, but they add Dansby Swanson and Cody Bellinger and Trey Mancini, and I think they have a decent, solid young core there. I mean, they have some guys like Patrick Wisdom and other guys, but I don't know. I feel like they're kind of a team that could kind of sneak up on some people. I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but I wouldn't be surprised if they won like mid 70s and wins.
Well, maybe 80s. Is that like a 500?
Like around 80. I think they could be like
record?
5 or 10 games below 500. I think it kind of creep up there.
What were we saying, Ed?
Their projected win totals around like 76. I think they're going to be a decent-ish team this year. If they competed for a playoff spot, I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, and then the rest of the division, how do you see that folding? Obviously, the Pirates and the Reds are kind of.
The Pirates, I think, are going to be a little better than they normally are this year. They put it together a serviceable lineup, like that's at least going to be able to go out and like compete and not just get like blown off the field every game. Like that, you guys would probably know every player in their starting lineup, honestly.
Yeah, well, they brought back McCutchen. They have Brian Hayes. They have
Choi from the Rays.
They have O'Neal Cruz. He's a pretty solid player.
Yeah, Brian Reynolds, Ji-Man Choi, Carlos Santana's on the team now.
Wow.
This is like
Austin,
the
Texas, I
most
think.
mid-washed lineup of
Midwest.
Yeah,
like
it's just I guess I know. I understand what they're doing. They're trying to compete, but
yeah, they're trying to make it look like they're gonna compete. I
Yeah.
guess that's really what it comes down to.
uh,
None,
Cincinnati is going to be an absolute nightmare this year. They might be the worst team in the league.
you're saying Cincinnati?
Yeah, you don't want to be anywhere near the city of Cincinnati when it comes to baseball for the next 4 years, in my opinion, at least. But
Hunter Green, though, I guess is one interesting player that they have. But
they have two good young pitchers, Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo. But other than that, Luis Sessa might be their number 3 starter, honestly.
wow.
Luis Sessa.
Wow.
Former Yankee.
All right. So let's move on to the last division, the NL West, and then I guess we can give a playoff prediction from each of us after that. But let's hear about the NL West.
All right, so I have like a hot West take that I've been talking a lot about to people. I don't think the Padres are gonna make the playoffs, which is
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
So you have the Dodgers
Can
winning
you
then?
elaborate? I'm curious.
I do have the Dodgers winning. Yeah, I'll elaborate on this. So obviously their 1-5 is unreal. It's probably one of the best 1-5s we've seen. If they stay healthy the entire year, I take back that statement. I think they'll make the playoffs. They'll stay healthy. But if one or two of them get hurt, this is a team with no depth and not a good bullpen and not a good starting rotation. Their starting rotation after Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove's hurt right now. So right after Darvish and Snell, it's made up of Nick Martinez, Michael Wacha, and Seth Lugo. Like
Wow.
that is just absolutely not going to be able to get it done with the competition in the NL. And people were expecting them to make this all-time great team, and I really don't think they're going to be some all-time great team. Like I maybe was exaggerating when not making the playoffs, but if the few guys get injured, and things can start going south quickly.
I guess that's a great way to look at it because depth is really important. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like we see
They
teams
don't
get
have any depth at all.
yeah, like you need like that's the one thing I will say about the Yankees. They usually have a lot better depth than a lot of the other teams, and I guess maybe it's not as great of a downfall like losing a starter to going to a backup, just because we do play a lot of our bench guys too. But some of these other teams, I mean, especially with the names that you just mentioned, that is a massive, massive downfall.
Yes. I got to say two things real quick. First of all, yeah. So if Xander Bogaerts or Tatis got hurt, or Hai-Sung Kim, so forth, like Rougned Odor would have to go in. Like he's on their bench. Like that's how bad it is.
Okay, wow, so that is pretty.
Also, there'll be a Gary Sanchez Union at Yankee Stadium tomorrow. He just signed with the Giants, pending a physical.
Wow, the great Gary Sanchez is going to be back in the MLB. Well,
Back at Yankee
Stadium.
Stadium.
It's real shot names.
yeah, we know one person's going to be pumped to say the least. All right, so how do you see the rest of the division finishing up? You have the Dodgers on top, but what do you see amongst the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, and the Giants?
D-backs, I actually like a lot this year. I think they're going to come in third in the division. They were really young. That's what my concern would be for them. They added Evan Longoria, which I thought was great because you need like a veteran presence in the locker room. Hopefully, he could provide some veteran leadership to the team because they're really young. They have a lot of prospects. Gabriel Moreno and Corbin Carroll were both like top 10 prospects last year. And Alec Thomas was also like a top 30 prospect. So it's going to be up to the kids. They have another young guy named Jake McCarthy. He's an outfielder. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He was actually under the radar, really good player last year. Didn't get talked about too much. They still have Ketel Marte. He was silently like one of the most consistent players in the league.
He's very underrated.
Yeah, very underrated. And they actually traded for Lourdes Gurriel Jr. too from the Blue Jays. So they have a pretty decent lineup going into the year. And
it's kind of sneaky young too, so it could improve.
Yes, they're so young, and with Zach Gallen, like he's a absolute superstar in the
He could be a
making.
Cy Young
Zach
winner.
Gallen,
I wouldn't be surprised.
and
if
their
he was a Cy Young
rotations
winner.
are decent.
Yeah, and Merrill Kelly's a not bad number 2 either. I think they could be a wild card team. I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the mix later in the year.
Yeah, Merrill Kelly. If he didn't pitch against the Dodgers last year, he would have been in like the Cy Young race. He had like a 10 ERA against the Dodgers or something.
Yeah, I mean between that and his USA baseball game and the championship, maybe he should just stay away from those types of games. All right, so let's talk about some predictions here because we only have a few minutes left. Who do you have winning each division in each AL, NL, and then who is your World Series champion? You can give a prediction too for a World Series matchup.
I got to go with. I think I'm going to do a 2021 rematch. Braves Astros, and Braves knocked them off again.
Okay, I like that. Jeff, over to you. Who do you like?
I was actually thinking the same thing. I think I'm gonna go with Braves Astros, and I like the Braves too.
Reminds me of like.
I'll pick the Yankees. I know that we're probably not going to get over the Astros, but I'm not picking the Astros because I just despise that franchise. And just for entertainment purposes, I'm going to say the Mets. I would love a Yankees Mets World
That would
Series.
be awesome.
I would love it. I really would. I would like eat it up, especially if the Yankees won. That would actually be probably one of the most fun sporting event wins.
Yeah, right. If they lost, it would be.
Oh,
I don't know.
It would be fetal from like the time that I literally turned the TV off. Well, actually, maybe from the time that last pitch happens.
I kind of like the Dodgers too, honestly, this year. I never liked the Dodgers, but this year I kind of do like them.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously a team we know has the talent. It's just about getting it done in October, which has been their biggest challenge.
Yeah, everyone's always high on them. I feel like this year no one's really talking about them that much. So might be their year.
All right. Well, Jeff, anything you want to add to this before we wrap up?
I don't know. I think that's pretty much it. We kind of went through every team in every division.
I
think
would
it's gonna be a fun year. I think there's clearly some good teams and there's some mid teams and then there's some bad teams. So
Yeah.
I think the question is, are any of those bad or mid teams gonna surprise anyone?
Especially the young ones.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think at the top, there's a lot of potential for a lot of these teams to be really, really good. I know we talked about the Padres, so I think that's one team I'm really looking out for. Like, can they finally like get over the hump and make the World Series and even win the World Series?
Yep. It should be a very exciting season, especially with the rule changes, the clock, the bigger bases, the no shifts. It looks very exciting and promising on the first day. So we wish everyone a happy baseball season. Ed, thank you as always for coming on.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
All right, thank
Thanks,
you.
Ed.
And Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I think that's gonna do it for our timer. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I want to just say quick congratulations to the Sacramento Kings on clinching a playoff berth. They now end the longest streak, or it was the longest active streak in sports. That title now goes to the Jets. So congrats, Jets fans, on your new title. First one, obviously, in a while. So congrats on that. But besides that, not much else to say.
Yeah, definitely a big accomplishment for the Kings. As they say out there, like the beam.
Yep.
So I think it's going to be interesting to see who they get in the first round if they can advance. So yeah, congratulations to the Kings. Other than that, Celtics crushed the Bucks last night with 41. So if that's a potential Eastern Conference Finals preview, I mean, sign me up for that. But yeah, it's going to be a very fascinating matchup. So thank you as always for listening. We will be back on Monday. Have a great weekend. Hello, welcome into WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome into another Friday edition of the show, Friday, March 31st. I'm your host today, Jeffrey Bozzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, how is your Friday going so far?
So far, so good. We got a big weekend coming up in terms of the sports world. We got the Final Four. We got the baseball season really just kicking off yesterday with opening day. It was a lot of fun. For those of us who won yesterday, unfortunately not for you, Jeff, the Phillies, despite their good start in the first inning, were not able to, or in the first couple innings, were not able to hold on, which I guess is kind of more of the same, right? With the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna make too much of a deal about it, but it's just one game. I mean, it's not how you want to start, but a little bit of shades of last year, especially early on last year with the bullpen. But hey, there's still 161 games left. I'm not really gonna worry too much.
Certainly, it's going to be Rob Thompson's first full year. So, I mean, you got to see how he ends up managing the pen. I think he did a really great job picking up last year, but this is a completely different role as opposed to the interim, as opposed to the full guy. So we'll see what happens going forward with your Phillies. My Yankees played yesterday, and Aaron Judge, of course, kicks off the season just in the most Aaron Judge way possible. He gets a strike taken that is, of course, nearly in the other's batter box because MLB umpires are a joke. And then the next pitch after that, he goes yard. And honestly, like, when he did it, like there's just something about magical, like Aaron Judge stepping on the field, Shohei Ohtani stepping on the field, like Bryce Harper in the playoffs when he, hit that one bomb. Like this guy is like some guys are just they have a knack for the moment and like he has it.
He picked up right where he left off last year. I mean, no surprise. He just comes in, hits his first home run, which is probably going to be the first of many again this season. So
Let's hope so.
yeah, good start for Judge and the Yankees. And there's some other storylines we'll get into as well. I would say the fact that the pitch clock was implemented for this year and moving forward, and yesterday was kind of the first day we
I
saw
thought
it in
the games
action.
were super entertaining.
Thought it was great. Yeah, it was kind of a wild day. I mean, there's a lot of good competition throughout the league.
There was a lot of
yesterday.
runs I felt like being scored too.
And I'm not sure if you saw this. For stolen bases, out of the 23 attempts, 21 were successful.
Honestly, that's great. I think the stolen bases part was definitely one of the better parts. I gotta understand too, especially in the beginning of the season, it's a little bit easier. I think on a hitter's end, just because we got the pitch clock, pitchers are still kind of getting into the thick of things. It's obviously tough for hitters because baseball's just a tough sport to begin with. But I'm not necessarily surprised that we've seen an offensive dominance through the first day. But there's going to be a lot that obviously balances it out. I'm sure maybe in the summer, once the pitchers get used to it, who's to say that there won't be more strikeouts? You know what I mean? Maybe guys will really start to take to working faster. And, it's just in general, as the season goes on, I'm sure everything will balance itself out.
Yeah, I think so. I think early on we will see kind of this adjustment period with not just the pitchers, but the hitters too, kind of
And no shift.
adjusting to the pitch clock and the shift too. That's another thing that's interesting. And I actually learned this yesterday while watching one of the MLB games. Apparently, for the infielders, you can't have your feet not in the dirt. You have to have at least 1 foot in the dirt. I think you can't have people going out to the shallow part of left field or center field or whatever. So you have to have at least 1 foot on the dirt. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Honestly, if you want to really truly ban it, there has to be a line, and I don't think that's a bad place to start. Um, as for the shift in general, like I do have my own opinions, but if the rule is the rule, and honestly, it's more a traditional way of playing baseball. But it was nice because we actually saw people playing the game the way it's supposed to. Stolen bases, Jeff, I don't think that could be underestimated enough because they really took advantage of that. These teams, specifically the game that I was watching, I was most impressed with was the Orioles. They had a lot of guys stealing bases, and they were able to put up a nice amount of runs for themselves and against the Red Sox, and they ultimately got the win.
Also,
But
Adley Rutschman went 5 for 5. I mean, he's kind of the
yeah,
guy that's
so
going to get a lot of attention there.
yeah, he was the first catcher in history to have 5 hits on opening day. I don't know if you happened to see the last one. Totally should have been an error. Like actually gift. Like he will never have a more gifted hit in his life.
Wow.
It was a very easy, I don't want to say easy ground ball, but just Devers completely misfielded it.
I did not see
Yeah,
that.
I was like, oh, that's an error. And then they made it a hit. And I was sitting with one of my roommates who's an Orioles fan, and he turns and goes, we look at each other and we're essentially like, that was one of the biggest gifts ever. I couldn't believe that they gave that as a hit, but unless there was something that I missed. But overall, I thought it was a very good first day of baseball, and I'm really excited for the season.
Yeah, me too. I haven't been this pumped in a while, but I think we're off to a good start so far. And we're definitely going to discuss this later in the show.
We're gonna have Eddie Stan come on, of course.
Yeah.
He's our I would say our biggest baseball fan who calls in by far.
Definitely a baseball guru.
Definitely a baseball guru to say the least. All right, let's get into March Madness now, because honestly, I feel like that is kind of the focus for this weekend in the sports world. We got 2 interesting matchups, which I don't think people would have predicted, and certainly they wouldn't have predicted the first matchup. We have the Florida Atlantic University Owls as a 9 seed going up against San Diego State, who was a 5, and both these teams have over 30 wins. Of course, FAU went 35-3 entering this game, which when you think about it is absolutely insane.
Oof.
And then San Diego State, after that first game against College of Charleston, where they were able to sneak it out, has gone on like a run here and really built some momentum for themselves, particularly with their defense. And we're going to see one of these teams in the national championship, whether we like it or not. I like it. I'm very excited. And it excites me to see a mid-major just in the championship, because I think it just shows us how much better college basketball has been, especially with the NIL implementation. I feel like basketball, especially sports in general at the college level, I think have definitely gotten a lot better because of it. Because now, especially in basketball, we see players are more inclined to stay. And I think it's just allowing more talent to reap the benefits of their talents while they're in college. And for the most part, I think that's another thing. I have really enjoyed watching this tournament so far, and I've really enjoyed FAU and San Diego State, and it should be a good one.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a good one. I think, like you said, no one really saw this matchup coming, but I'm looking at who these teams beat to get there. I mean, you start with FAU. They take care of business. They kind of have a tough game against Memphis. They sneak by that one. They beat Fairleigh Dickinson, who obviously beat Purdue. They get by that game, and then they have a very impressive win against Tennessee, and then they followed up with a probably even more impressive win against Kansas State, who was hot at the time. And then you look at San Diego State, they took care of business against College of Charleston. They crushed Furman. They beat Alabama, which is an absolute shocker to some people. And then they squeaked by Creighton with that somewhat of a controversial call at the end. I guess that's what people were calling it. But they have found ways to win late. And I don't know, going into this game, I feel like FAU, they're just so well rounded, especially offensively. I just feel like they have a lot of different weapons they go to. Now, their defense is probably a little worse than San Diego State. So I think something's going to give there. But I don't know. I think FAU is kind of this team of destiny. And they've said it throughout the tournament. They don't really view themselves as a Cinderella anymore. They're kind of here to stay.
I like that approach. That's certainly an interesting way of thinking about it. They are by far the lowest seed, though, so I can understand the Cinderella mindset. But when you kind of look at everybody, but really with the exception of UConn, I don't think any of these teams are really thought of to make a deep run. But FAU, like we said, was ranked most of the season, and we felt on this show, I think you would agree with this, Jeffrey, we thought they were a little underseeded.
Definitely. I don't think the 9 seed was definitely accurate for them. They probably could have been
A 7.
a 7 or even a 6.
I thought
Probably
7 would have
probably
been fair.
reasonable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
7 would have been the most fair, like a 7-10 matchup. Instead, they get the 8-9. And not that there's so much of a difference with that. It's just the fact that they were the lower seed in that 8-9 matchup. And I don't know, they were definitely a little bit disrespected. But point is, it doesn't really matter because they went on their run and they're here in the Final Four and they have their chance to ultimately cash in and try and win a title. I'm going to be honest, I like FAU tomorrow.
I think I do too. I just like how they play. I said, and no discredit to San Diego State either. And I love how they play too. I just feel like FAU seems like more of a well-rounded team.
You know what it is about FAU? And I said this after their last win, or especially against their win against Tennessee. I thought this was even more true. They adjust really well in terms of who they're playing against. Like some teams are like, okay, like San Diego State, their focus is going to be their defense, right? But if FAU is scoring on them, then where do they kind of go? Because they're going to be kind of screwed, right? Like I'm just giving an example. Whereas with this FAU team, they've played high scoring, really intense matchups like we saw with FDU particularly. That matchup really kicked up in the second half. But then you see them against Tennessee, and they have what is an absolute defensive menacing team, right? Like really good defense. And they're still able to gut that one out as well. And they were able to adjust and overcome, despite the fact that I don't really think it was a great matchup for them because Tennessee's a really good defense. And then they go up against a team like Kansas State and they put up a lot of points and they're able to win that way too. So they've been able to win in multiple ways, and that like checks multiple boxes in my mind. And that's just kind of why, that's one of the reasons why I really like this team. I believe like no matter who they play against, they kind of do always have a chance.
Yeah, I feel like every game's different and they've kind of learned how to win different ways throughout their tournament so far. And we kind of saw Vladislav Golden kind of assert himself in that Elite Eight game when they took down Kansas State. He was kind of asserting himself down low. And Janelle Davis is the guy who is going to probably lead them in scoring most nights. So he's obviously going to be the focal point. And the funny thing is we talk about FAU and how they've been ranked a good amount of this year. And the same can be said for San Diego State. I mean, they've been ranked in the 20s for the decent amount of the year. And they actually barely even won their conference tournament. So it's crazy to say that they go from barely squeaking out of the Mountain West final, and they were going to make it anyway, probably with an at-large bid if they didn't win that game. But the fact that they squeak by Utah State and then they go on this run and they go all the way to the Final Four is kind of nuts. I mean, I never really saw a Mountain West team, or even FAU for that matter, and forgive me for not knowing what conference they're in.
Conference USA.
Conference USA, a Conference USA team and a Mountain West team in the Final Four. I mean, it's not how we drew it up.
No,
But here we are.
It's certainly not. And coming into this year, the Mountain West had a really bad track record in the tournament.
Really bad track record.
Really bad. And actually, besides San Diego State, I don't think any of the other Mountain West teams won a game. The ones that were in the tournament, because it was Utah State, they lost. And then it was also Boise State
And Nevada.
and Nevada.
Nevada
Yeah,
lost
Nevada-
to Arizona
Nevada lost
State
in
in
the
the
first four.
play-in / first four. And then Utah State fell to someone. Missouri, I think it was.
Mhm. So yeah, like they were some of those matchups were like 7-10s. And obviously San Diego State was the 5. They were the highest seeded, but they didn't even look that good in their first game. Like it was very like I did not look at that and be like, oh, this is a team that's going to make a run.
They kind of sleptwalked through that game against Charleston.
Absolutely. And that was interesting too, because if you looked, right, they were playing in Orlando, and my thought like that day was, oh, maybe they're a little bit jet lagged because they had to go through that East region. That's where a lot of the games were. But it seemed like they got to get better or got to play better as they were there longer. So it might have just been that first game and maybe wasn't really proof of who they were. And, I got to give them respect too, because I know that whenever your defense shows up every week, every game, whatever it is, you're going to always have a chance, especially when it's as good as this one. I mean, they really do a good job on defense of holding people to low amounts. I mean, I feel like every single team that I've watched them play, they've thrown their offense kind of off of where it is. Against Creighton, Creighton's offense was certainly thrown off. Alabama, the offense was certainly thrown off. Against Furman couldn't get anything going. They obviously looked really good in the second half against Virginia, especially when they were shooting their threes, which they had done pretty well. But the minute they go up against this San Diego State defense, they really look to struggle. And I think the only comparable matchup for FAU is that matchup against Tennessee, right? I think it's going to be a very similar game to that, where it's going to be kind of low scoring. They're going to have to find a way to gut it out. And I feel like every bucket is going to matter in this game.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to, do you trust the San Diego State defense or do you trust the FAU offense? Because I think that's clearly the matchup that we're going to look for. And I think the other side will be interesting too, how the San Diego State offense attacks the FAU defense. But I don't know. I think something's going to give there. And I think for San Diego State, I just feel like they kind of play into their defense and they kind of slowly crawl back in these games. I mean, I'm looking at the Alabama game specifically. They
hang
down
their hat
for a good amount of that game, and they were up at half, but didn't really feel like they were in control. And then they got down a little bit, but they kind of just hang their hat, like you said, on defense, and they get inside too. I feel like they don't take a lot of outside shots. I feel like they do a good job of getting in the paint.
Yeah, San Diego State in general, I think, has to be very methodical and kind of smart with their offense because they don't really have any like superstar scorers, right? And when you're more of a defensive team, you're going to just look to get buckets whatever way you can, hopefully off of like transition. That's like ideal. You want to get steals, you want to get rebounds that you can get people down the other side of the floor quick enough and get the easiest buckets possible, especially when you're hanging your hat on their defense because it's been playing so well. Whereas with FAU, though, I feel like the problem is if San Diego State tries to play fast, that's going to play right into the hands of FAU just because they're able to play fast. They've done it. We saw they were able to play that matchup against Kansas State. We saw they were able to play the matchup against Tennessee. It's like no matter what, they're going to kind of have a chance because they kind of just find a way to win. Like that's what makes it so tough. But San Diego State defense cannot be underestimated enough. And if they really shut down the FAU offense and really do a great job, then I'm not going to be surprised if San Diego State wins at all, especially with the way the defense has been playing.
Yeah, and I'm looking here at their last 4 games. The highest point total that San Diego State has given up is 64, and that was to Alabama. All their other games, they've given up points in the 50s. So
yeah,
they really know how to shut down the opposition.
Yeah, and credit to their defense, credit to their coaching, because I think that's been a really big step in this is like you don't really get guys to play super well defense unless they're coached well. So they've done a really good job with that. But I'm interested to hear you like FAU. Is that your pick 100% in this game? Is that who you're going with?
I'm going with FAU.
Yeah. So listen, if either of those teams wins the national championship, will you be surprised? FAU or San Diego State?
I will be surprised.
Yeah, I would agree.
I would probably take someone in the second game.
Well, I feel like And we can just go into the second game now. I feel like in the second game, I think everyone in their mind just think it's a foregone conclusion that UConn's going to win. And honestly, I think it's really disrespectful towards this Miami team.
It
Like,
definitely is.
I think Miami has been playing awesome.
They have been.
And I'm going to be honest with you. There's not like anything Miami does like super, super, super well besides score. Like, I think their offense is by far their best kind of attribute. But the thing is the UConn defense is so good as well as their offense. But when you just combine those two things, I think you look at that and you kind of give UConn that advantage. But here's my thing. What if the UConn defense is not able to stop the Miami offense and it's a very high scoring game? I mean, to be fair, UConn has not really been in any dogfights recently. Like, they really haven't.
They also just have blown everyone out.
Yeah,
too.
they
So
had,
that's credit to them too.
no, yeah, but it's interesting because it's like I think this is the Final Four, right? This is a completely different animal. You're playing in a football stadium. There's how many people in the building? Like what? Like 200,000, right? Like I don't even know how many people they end up like getting in there, but it's usually an insane amount. And you're playing in the middle of a football field, right? It's the gym is so big.
Elevated court.
It's elevated court. It's a way different mindset than all these other games. And I feel like in this game, it's just like this foregone conclusion that UConn wins, like I said. And honestly, I think that's disrespectful, like I was saying before, just because I feel like they have not really truly seen an offense like the one that Miami has played. Now, I'll give them credit. They have beaten some really solid teams. Like when they beat Gonzaga, that's a huge win. Gonzaga came off that huge game. But let's not act like that Drew Timmy foul early in the second half did not completely change the game, right? UConn ended up hitting a three right before the end of the first half. That gave them, I think it was a 7-point lead. It would have been 4 if had that not happened. And I felt like after that three hitting, them coming right out, Timmy getting the 4th foul, Timmy then having to come out of the game, that changed everything. That gave UConn all the momentum, and they were able to ride that as they should. They're a really good team. And Gonzaga without Timmy was awful. So if UConn really didn't win that game, I would have been surprised. So maybe it's not as great a win as we're making it out to be when you really do a deep dive. Whereas with Miami, I mean, I just been surprised. Can I be honest? I really did not expect them to beat Texas at all.
I did not either. I mean, they were down 10. It might have been more than 10 with probably 10 minutes left in the second half. And I thought they were kind of dead in the water because they didn't really have anything going. And all of a sudden, they start making their shots. And like you said, that's the one thing they do really, really, really well is they can score in a bunch of different ways from a bunch of different guys. So
And they put up 80 in their last 3 games.
that's going to be the ingredient. They're
only-
going to have to score a lot of
Yeah,
points.
they're going to have to score a lot of points. And you know what I thought too in their last 3 games against Texas, Houston, and Miami, or I'm sorry, and Indiana. No, I'm talking about Miami. The one thing that they did really well, and I'm not talking about their scoring, I'm actually talking about their defense, but not their defense as a whole. It's almost like the timeliness of it. Like in the second half, that's really when they start to get going. Like you saw that against Texas. They really hunkered down. They started to make some things happen. Now, I know Texas was dealing with some injuries that I think had a big effect on them, but at the same time, they were really starting to, I think, play their best ball in like the later stages of that game, particularly on the defensive end. And I think that was ultimately what was able to get them over the hump. And if they have that timely defense against UConn, especially in the magnitude of this game where the intensity is going to be high, and there's a very good chance that they come out with that intensity on defense right away. I don't know. I think this can be a ball game. I really wouldn't be surprised if Miami won.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Miami won either. And just to back it up, you're going into this game. So you have Miami. We know they can score and they have a bunch of weapons. And it's interesting because they're not really known for their defense, but I was just looking at their last 2 games and they went up against Houston and Texas, who are both very good teams. And they kind of contained the stars on both teams really well. On Houston, they held Marcus Sasser to 4 for 12 from shooting. So that's a pretty good job. And then for Texas, they limited Marcus Carr to 6 for 15. So they clearly did a pretty good job of limiting the number 1 options on the opposition. And then you look at their offense, and Isaiah Wong is clearly the guy that is probably going to be the number 1 scorer. He's going to be the focal point, but you can't forget about Omier down low, who's a force on the boards. He can be a very popular guy to be an impact player. And then you have Poplar, who can play a little bit. You have Pack who can make shots, and Miller had a really good game in the Elite Eight. So they just have a lot of guys who can knock down open shots and kind of create for themselves. And I think that's going to be a challenge for the UConn defense. But if you flip it to UConn, it's just they've looked so good. I feel like every single game in the tournament, and it's fair to, I don't know, question them because they haven't really been put in a battle test kind of mode yet. But they've done a good job of keeping themselves out of that situation. But I just love how they have different ways they can score. They can dump it down low and go to Sonogo. They have Hawkins on the outside, who's an absolute sniper from downtown. I mean, he can make pretty much a shot from anywhere on the floor. And then you have other guys like Caravan and Jackson and Newton who can kind of chip in a little bit too. So they're very well rounded. If I'm picking the game, I don't know. I think I'm going with UConn just because I think they're just more solid on both ends of the floor. And it's no credit to
No, they
discredit to
are.
Miami.
They
It's just
are on paper.
I would take like the team that has like a more solid defense and more solid offense rather than someone who has like a firepower offense. But I will say I wouldn't be surprised if Miami won either because they've kind of been disrespected a little bit because many people, including myself, picked Drake to beat them in the first round. I mean, I'll admit it right here on air. I did not pick Miami to win that game, and now they just run the table and they're all the way in the Final Four. So I do think they can win, but I'll take UConn.
Yeah, I listen. All the signs point to UConn. Like they look like the better team. Defense is flawless. Their offense has been rolling on all cylinders. The only thing is like I don't know if they've seen an offense really as great as what Miami has been playing, right? Like that's my honest question. I would say the only exception would be Gonzaga. Gonzaga was okay in the first half when they were at full strength with Timmy, of course. But then the second half, it kind of came burning down. Now, if Miami's on their game, though, I'm going to be honest. I'll take Miami. I just think that there's no way that it's just a foregone conclusion to me. Unless UConn is some super team that maybe they are with their way that they've played defense. But I think back to the regular season too, right? Like they lost to Marquette in the Big East tournament. It was a decent game. But it wasn't like UConn was like a top 10 team here. And this is one of the most open seasons of college basketball. So not that really matters that much because at the end of the day, they are in the Final Four. And clearly, when you look at the other three teams as well, it really does not matter.
Yeah.
But my point is they have flaws. There's ways that you can, I think, attack them. There's holes that they have within their team. And if Miami's hot and they're playing well and their team, I would say right now, who is hot, who is playing well, then I can really see this being a game, and I really don't have a problem picking Miami. And I'm going to be honest, I actually think it's insane that the spread is 5.5.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And that Miami is over 2-1 to win this game.
Especially because it's a 4 versus 5 game. And I know UConn's looking like a really, really, really good 4 seed, and Miami's looking like a really good 5 seed. But yeah, 5.5's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Want to take or anything else you want to add to this?
No, I think it's going to be fascinating because we have the one matchup where you got 2 mid-majors going at it. So one of them is going to be in the championship game, like you said, on Monday night. And then the other matchup's more of a powerhouse kind of matchup, more star power just because it's an ACC Big East showdown. So there's definitely more familiarity with that matchup considering that you have more recognizable schools, I guess you could say, with Miami and UConn. But it's going to be fascinating to see that we're going to have a mid-major playing one of these Power 5 schools in the championship on Monday. So I'm curious how it's going to shake out. I'm excited, though.
I am very excited as well, and I'm really looking forward to the Final Four. I have to say, this is one of the, I think, really more intriguing years, just because, like we said, a mid-major has the chance to go to the national championship, and we really don't have that often.
Yeah. So I think that'll do it for that part of the show. And before we go to break, I actually wanted to mention something. And I'm not sure if you saw this. I was sent this video by one of our friends, Lane Whitla. Shout out Lane. Apparently, there was a balk that won the game for St. John's against Fairfield the other night. Apparently,
Division I baseball.
There was a balk in, I think it might have been extra innings. I think it was the 11th inning where the catcher was called for a balk because he was using his mask, I think, to catch the ball. It was something weird.
He used his mask to stop the ball?
To stop the ball. I was reading it and I'm still kind of confused, but it was just very bizarre how it ended. And I'm reading it here. It says that a regular balk is defined when a pitcher makes an illegal motion on the mound that the umpire deems to be deceitful to the runner. But I think the catcher blocked the ball and he kept it in front of the plate with his mask. And apparently he touched the ball with his mask, and apparently they called it a balk. It was very strange. I mean, I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, I saw the video as well, and the only way I can explain it is game losing balk by the catcher.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just a very strange call because we don't really see that often in baseball. But at the end of the day, I guess it's a rule that nobody really knows about. When you think about it, all these sports have very odd rules that nobody knows about. I mean, I would say no rule was ever stupider, right, than the Tuck rule, like the one that ended up giving Tom Brady that Super Bowl and then the kind of the win in the AFC Championship over the Raiders. I mean, that looked like a fumble. Like I can't even believe that like that was a rule.
Yeah.
Because it looked so just odd. And in this situation too, it's just something that's so like outside of most fans' knowledge that we kind of can't comprehend. And also when you combine the fact that it's what loses them the game, I think it makes it even more kind of controversial. But at the end of the day, if it is a rule and it's in the rule book, there's really not much you can do. I guess it's just lesson learned, but I'll tell you what, it's a really tough way to lose a game.
Yeah, and it's actually funny you bring up the Tuck rule because I remember watching a 30 for 30, and Tom Brady during that documentary said, yeah, it was a fumble. But I have some clarity about the balk. So it says that they were in the 11th inning, Fairfield and St. John's, and the Fairfield pitcher, he was pitching and it was a 1-0 count. He throws the ball and it goes in the dirt, and the catcher, he blocked the ball and he kept it in front of the plate so that the runner couldn't score. And then apparently while he was trying to regather the ball to throw it back to the pitcher, he used his catcher's mask to touch the ball. So that's why he got called for the balk. And then the umpire obviously saw that and called it a balk. And then, yeah, that was it. So very strange way to end a game. And I don't know if this has a direct correlation with the pitch clock, but I feel like there might be some bizarre ways this year in the MLB where games might end with a batter not being ready or a pitcher not being ready. I don't know.
Yeah, I can definitely see that
I
happening.
think it's going to happen once or twice.
I think it is
We'll see.
too. But at the same time, and Stroman, I believe, had one yesterday in the first inning. But
I think he was the first person to get called for the violation.
yeah, and it becomes a selfishness thing. Like it's new rules. It's like a shot clock in basketball. You don't get to just shoot the ball whenever you want. You have to play within the rules now because you're hurting your team. So it just makes some more sense to pay attention.
Definitely. So it's definitely going to be something that we're going to have to keep monitoring as the season rolls along. But we're going to take a quick break here on After the Whistle. When we come back, we're going to recap everything from MLB's opening day and a whole lot more. So stay with us. We will be right back.